that come into these rooms. I am grateful myself to have Roberta part of my network. So, with great pleasure, here's Roberta.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for your service. Thank you. So I'm an addict. My name is Roberta.
Hey, Roberta.
I'm grateful to be clean today, and welcome to the 10th annual Santee Family Camp. Woo! This is my first time here, so it truly is an honor to be invited to speak in an event that I have never been. So you got me up here, and I think within the 10 minutes that I was here, I already got a cabin for next year. So welcome to be an addict, right? I want to thank everybody that is of service to this event. It takes a lot to plan an event, to set up registration, come up with t-shirts, come up with speakers, where we're going to eat, and all that good stuff. So thank you for everybody that's of service today. And thank you all for being here and being part of my recovery. I was invited to speak on the traditions for about an hour. So we all going to have to practice some patience and tolerance, right? Because exactly. In the past, when I have been to workshops about the traditions, usually we split the traditions, right? Each speaker speak on three traditions, because there's a lot of history on the traditions, and there's a lot of literature on the traditions. There's a lot of spiritual principles in the traditions, and the traditions are really, really important. So it does take a little while to go over the traditions, and my memory is not that good. So, of course, I have my book and my notes about the traditions. But before coming and speaking, I did a lot of reading over the week, and I listened to some old-timers, people that were around here in 1950s when NA started, and Jimmy Kay, one of our founders, really explaining the purpose of the traditions and how important the traditions are, right? So again, I'm not an expert on the traditions whatsoever. What I have done is I just done a little bit of my homework. I have worked the traditions with a sponsor. I worked the traditions with my sponsees. I have attended conventions, workshops about the traditions, but mostly important, I believe in the traditions. I believe the traditions help me to help protect NA as a whole, and help me to protect the fellowship as a whole for the people that are not even coming through the doors yet, right? So the steps helps me to protect me and my recovery. The traditions help me to protect the groups, areas, service, and the whole fellowship, and our message and the people that need to hear this message. Because a lot of people try to get help in other places, and sometimes it works. But I know for a fact, being here for a little while, I know our program works. And if we don't have our program protected, then the generations coming ahead of us are not going to hear the message that we heard, and this message saves lives, at least saved my life, So a little bit of background on the traditions. The traditions were created in AA, American Airlines, by Bill Wilson, one of the founders of AA. First time that he created the traditions that was written, the traditions was in the AA Grapevine magazine in the 1950. 1946. Yeah, I need to look at my notes, So 1946, the traditions were first created and printed in the Grapevine AA magazine, and they were first time used in AA International Convention in the 1950s when Jimmy Kay was actually getting clean, okay? And in 1953, that's when Jimmy Kay started our fellowship, Narcotics Anonymous, okay? So from 1953 to 1959, NA really struggled to keep their doors closed. And according to the history, and if you look on and you listen to Jimmy Kay's CDs, you can do that on YouTube, or if you listen to a lot of old-timers when they were here at the beginning of Narcotics Anonymous, they were saying that NA had a really hard time surviving because NA was not using the traditions on their groups. So in 1959, and around December, NA actually closed its doors, okay? And Jimmy K started the NA again in the beginning of 1950s in California, but they got together and they say, we must use the traditions. We must use the traditions in the groups because NA is not going to survive. So I think it was after that point on, the Narcotics Anonymous started to take the traditions really, really serious. Okay, and why is it so serious? Because we almost died in the end of 1950s. So that's when Narcotics Anonymous really start abiding by the tradition. So just a little bit of history with that. I had to write that down and I had to learn that because I did not know. You know, if an old timer was doing this workshop, they will be sharing like they lived that moment, you know, and I wasn't here. But thank God that they talk about in the workshops and in the history of Narcotics Anonymous, you know. So what is the purpose of the traditions? It is to keep us together, unify us so we can carry a message, right? And for NA to keep growing. So like at the end of the 1950s, like I said, NA died. So they like, well, let's really work and apply the traditions just like when we apply the steps so we can keep NA growing. And NA has grown a lot. You know, it's all over the world. I do not have the statistics. I'm not going to bore you with that. But if you look it up at NA.org, we got thousands of meetings all over the world, you know. And that is because we take the traditions serious, you know. Another thing that I heard a lot, so I'm not the NA police, you know, I'm just saying what I heard, you know, and this is what we do in Narcotics Anonymous. Like we get some knowledge, we learn to apply that, and we share that with other people. And that's all that I'm doing. I didn't come up with any of this. This is not my research, my results, nothing. I'm just repeating information, you know. And what I have heard from old timers, if you only work the 12 steps, you only work in half of a program, right? These are not my words. I'm just repeating because it's a 12 and 12 program, you know. And in our mothership, the AA, right, that's when they publish a book, and it's called The 12 Steps, right, and the 12 Traditions. And that's where they do the work, you know. And I'm just bringing that up again because that's where we based our program and our literature from. So they say, like, you need the 12 traditions because on the 12 steps, you learn about your disease and you learn how to protect yourself from the disease and you learn how to recover. And the 12 traditions will help you to have healthy relationships. It's the keys to relationships. And if you're going to be clean here for a little while, you need other people. We're a fellowship, right? 12-step fellowship. And how do we get along with other people? So it is really important. And learning the traditions is where you learn the principles to apply in your relationships. And we learn that here in the groups, and then we learn in service. So we can take outside of our fellowship, in our relationships, and our work, right? And we can be part of a society, right? So I don't know about you guys. I came in with no social skills, right? I think part of addiction, at least for me, I was very isolated. You know, my family was very dysfunctional, and that's not the story for everybody. My story, you know, my parents were not very social people. You know, my parents came from very traumatic backgrounds, and they passed that on to me. What does that mean? Well, they didn't have a lot of friends. They didn't trust people. You know, they kept secrets. They definitely didn't ask for help, right? So I didn't know these things, you know. I did not know. Well, they unconditional loved me because I was their daughter, but they didn't unconditional love anybody else. Like, you step on their toes, they cut people off, you know. And my parents have very, very few friends. I did not grow up with, and that's not the story for everybody, but I did not grow up with a house full of friends and my parents' friends. And some people do, but a lot of them are drinking. They're not intimate relationships, right? And we didn't have intimate relationships with our family members either. Like, my grandparents rarely know really what was going on in our house, right? So coming into this program, I see everybody kind of getting together. And, you know, and we don't have presidents in Narcotics Anonymous. So we have to work together to make this machine work. And I would see people like on service, disagreeing, but is still hugging each other and smiling and going to meetings and maybe not liking each other, but helping the newcomer together and smiling and just getting along and going to conventions. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like too social for me, And my first year clean, like I didn't even share. Like I was so quiet, and I did not know how this was going to work out, So, but I trust a sponsor and I start working the steps and I got a little bit of self-esteem enough to work my program, okay? And be around you guys and not be so scared. I got a relationship of a higher power that helped me to have some self-esteem and some confidence to be around you. Because without that relationship, I think you out to get me, right? And I'm also searching for somebody to defend me, him or her. And putting myself in some very codependent relationships and some very risky relationships that I might get victimized again, right? So I was able to ride on the steps and on the traditions, on the steps and on the sponsor for about 5 years, okay? When I had about 5 years clean, I finished the steps, and I was really judgmental because don't you know I finished the steps, I know everything. I was of service. I have always been of service from the beginning of my recovery. I was a GSR. I think with 5 years clean, I was a area treasurer, in charge of the area money. I wasn't serving the groups. I was in charge of the NA money, right? And I was just in this place that I was really lonely, and I was judgmental, and I have very negative thoughts about people. People will talk shit about other people, and I'll observe all of that. I allow your opinion of other people to enter how I related to them, and I talk so much shit about people's programs that when they would come around me, I'll have this awful feeling, and I will blame them. Oh, they must have really bad energy, that I feel so sick around them. No. What is my part is behind the scenes, I'm talking shit, right? I'm judgmental in the meeting. So when the person comes next to me, I don't feel well. That's because of my own toxicity. Okay, because if I'm in a good place, I don't feel that way around you. My heart is open, I'm open-minded, right? So, but I didn't know any of these things, and so I was backed up in a corner with 5 years clean. And my old-time sponsor, she used to say, a lot of people walk away from Narcotics Anonymous from 5 to 10 years. Because, you get all the tools from the steps and you have to be of service and you start thinking that Narcotics Anonymous has nothing to offer you. You start thinking that you're wasting your time here. You have this big old life outside of Narcotics Anonymous and you come here, everybody's crazy, everybody's disagreeing and such can stay clean, and there's drama and you start thinking like, I don't need Narcotics Anonymous anymore. This place is crazy. I'm going to be out of here. I'm not getting anything else out of Narcotics Anonymous. And my sponsor said, what's happening with you is you got what you needed to get and it's your time to give back. But you're so judgmental that you can't give back. You have all the knowledge, but the knowledge hasn't really dropped from the head to your heart. And that is what the traditions are all about. It's about unconditional love. It's about to be of service from a place of unity and compassion and empathy and tolerance, something that's, all these things were really foreign to me, right? So I started on the journey with the traditions, and I'm very passionate about the traditions because it was through the traditions that I was able to stay here, and I can stay here because something changed. If I had just worked the steps, I think I would have been out of the door by now, and that's what they say, this is a 12 and 12. And I need the steps to learn to navigate service, to learn to protect the fellowship, to share a message that's not about the messenger, it's just about the message. The simplicity of our message and how important our message is. And without working the traditions with a sponsor, I would have not been able to do that. And another purpose of the traditions is once you practice this enough, you internalize these principles because the traditions has a lot of principles. Once you learn to internalize those principles, you can use them in your workplace and you can use them in your relationships or your affiliations or your hobbies outside of here, and it can actually function in society, right? And that is really important to me. So I came from that little scared little girl sitting on the corner thinking everybody was out to get me, or if everybody was bigger than me and better than me, or I was better than everybody. I was just not right-sized. If you get confused with anything that I say today, just remember the traditions is about unconditional love and to get right-sized, okay? So that's how I started the journey. I was in an emotional relapse, and I think a lot of us get there. We get into this emotional social relapse before we actually walk out the door and use, so I'm just going to get into it, like how do we do that, So we're going to start with the most important tradition, which is tradition 1, just like step 1, right? If we don't surrender, we cannot work any of the other steps. So the tradition 1 is about unity. If we don't practice unity, we cannot practice anything else in service. And we're not going to be able to carry a message, if we're full of anger or if we're not helping other people or if we're judgmental, So tradition 1 is about unity, right? It is how we recover together. I was out there trying to recover for 15 years, and I did lots of different things, I would not go out or I wouldn't go to the liquor store, but what I was missing in my recovery was you guys. I cannot recover alone. The moment I think I don't need you guys and I can recover alone, I'm in a high risk for relapse. So tradition 1 is all about that, right? The unity and us doing whatever we can to stay together, right? And it's not easy. So I'm going to read something about the first tradition, okay? Coming to the terms with the first tradition can be challenging. And by the way, this is an amazing book, Guiding Principles. This book really teaches how to apply this with our members in service, in society, and within the fellowship. That's how powerful the traditions are. You can apply all these principles in all these different areas so you can stay here. And that's the same with relationships. If we don't apply all these principles in our relationships, we're not going to keep growing in a relationship, right? We're not going to grow into intimacy, right? So as I'm talking about the traditions, I'll try to relate that. How do we apply that in relationships? Because that's what the traditions do. They help us in our relationships, not just in service. It's just not a boring set of rules, right? So it says here, coming to terms with the first traditions can be challenging. We need each other desperately, and yet we are afraid. This reservation often comes from our experience of being hurt. We tend to react in these unifying ways to the possibility of being hurt again. Our instinct is to meet disease with disease. But when we meet in with love and compassion instead, we create an opportunity to recover. Addictions separate us from others, and unity is the antidote to alienation. As our trust in the fellowship grows, we can be less afraid. Unity of purpose keeps us together when feelings are pushing us towards the door. Staying through difficulty is a profound act of surrender. We need each other more than we need our old beliefs. So I learned on the traditions to really set aside my feelings, my opinions, and my judgments, because my life depends on it. Just like my life depends on it, that's step 1. My idea of staying clean and in this process for the long term depends on me setting myself aside. And as I was doing this research, again, lots of spiritual principles, right? I don't know them by heart. So the spiritual principles of tradition 1 are beautiful. They're a lot like the step 1, okay? It's surrender, hospitality towards others, love, empathy, acceptance, commitment, and unity. On the first tradition is the first time that Roberta learned how to put the I aside of the program and allow the we side of the program come along, right? And we learned that into the groups. So if you are here and you want to stay in this process in the long term, you have to get involved with a group. You have to have a home group, because this is where we're going to learn in the group business meetings, or group conscious, as you say here in the East Coast. We say business meetings, but I actually like group conscious better than business meeting, because we're trying to get a group conscious together. And we learn to set aside our opinions and let everybody have their own opinion, and we try to find a common ground. Isn't that all about relationships? If there's one person in the relationship that has all the same and doesn't compromise, is this relation going to grow? Is this relationship going to be based in intimacy? No, it's imbalanced, right? So the same thing with the group. For the group to carry a strong message, and the group is the biggest, it's the biggest weapon to carry this message that we have, right? It is in the group that we carry the message to the newcomers who are coming to our meetings. And all the other business that we do in NA is about getting the newcomer to a meeting. It is about getting a newcomer to hear the message. So if we're not unifying and balanced, we're not going to have a good message. Okay, so it's like really important, right? So how do we apply this relationship, this principles in relationships, right? And I told you I have notes for everything because there's no way I can remember 12 of these guys, right? So again, how do we apply these principles? We have to learn by writing on them and start acting differently. You learn about them, but you have to put them into action. And how do you put this into action in relationships, right? Is you have to find something in common in your relationship. You have to be on the same page of your relationships, and that takes surrender, empathy, acceptance, commitment, and unity, right? To be a intimate relationship and for the relationship to grow. And you have to find a common purpose. Right? So what is our common purpose here, right? We want to get better, right? We don't want to go back to using, and we want to share recovery. So the same in relationships, right? You have to find what is it in this relationship that we want a girl or we don't want a girl or we want to be intimate. If you don't have a common ground in a relationship, I don't think the relationship is going to grow. At least mine haven't, So our common ground here, we are unified to stay clean and to carry this message to the people that have not heard this message or that need to hear that message. And we need to do that by setting ourselves aside and coming together in balance to be able to carry this message. So that's tradition 1, Tradition 2 is, I'm sorry, I didn't read the tradition. There's that too, right? So tradition 1 was our common welfare should come first, right? I'm going to put the we in front of the I. Personal recovery depends on NA unity. So the second tradition is, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscious. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. Okay, so we're talking about, right, we are addicts, we get clean, me too. I like to say I'm type A, but I'm really a control freak. And I know I'm not alone in this room. I know I'm not. So sometimes we get into the service positions, right? Even sometimes as a speaker, like, I want to tell you how much I know. No. This is what the Narcotics Anonymous have taught me. I am just a vessel of the message, not the messenger. And the same when we have these positions in service, right? It is not about us leading. It's about us serving, right? And finding that group conscious, okay? So tradition trust is a lot about trust, right? So if I'm stepping back, I have to deal with my own fears. Because don't you know, if I'm not in control, is this really going to work out? And what about if we fail? What about if such and such idea is awful for a home group? Oh, guess what? We're going to have to go through the process. If the group decides that that's how we're going to move forward, I'm going to have to set aside my control and my ideas and let us have that experience, So it is a lot about trust, and it's a lot about compromising, in a group. Is we going to all talk. Everybody's voice is equal and important. Old-timer, newcomer, everybody's voice is important, And that's something else I learned about the traditions is behind each tradition, I learned deeper and deeper about anonymity, which is the foundation of all our traditions. And anonymity, when I got here, I was really confused because I thought, anonymity just means you cannot know my last name and you cannot talk about who was at the meeting or what they share. But anonymity is a lot more than that. It's the sense of we're all equal and we're all the same. And that really helps with my self-esteem, because when I see somebody with a lot of clean time and they're speaking, I might think that they know better than me. And it's not like that. We're all the same. And that has really helped me not to put people on pedestals, because we do that, right? And what happens is eventually they become human and they fall. And then all of a sudden, Narcotics Anonymous failed me. I don't know if that's a very painful experience, and I had experienced that. So now I feel like everybody is the same, right? And that helps me to actually open my mouth too. Because if I think you're the best and you know better than me and you have this great knowledge, I don't open my mouth, and that doesn't help with my self-esteem. We're all equal here. We all have our say, okay? And we all have great ideas, and they're all the same. So it's a lot about trusting, and it's an act of love, allowing other people to be part of our process, even if they're new or if they don't know things about Narcotics Anonymous. That's how we learn, right? And So the spiritual principles of the second tradition is humility, surrender, acceptance, anonymity, unity, trust, compromising. Amazing, right? And when we get together, we let the group, it's like the spirit of Narcotics Anonymous come together. We come with an idea, we go around the table, everybody share their things, we compromise a little bit here and there, and all of a sudden we find something that works. That happens at area, happens at region, and that can happen in our relationships too, right? With our relationships, again, we have to find that common ground, and if somebody has something to say in a relationship, we have to listen. We have to compromise. And then together, we come up with a relationship conscious. How are we going to move forward in our finances? How are we going to move forward in a project at work, right? Or how are we going to move forward with anything? You know, it becomes equal, that equality, right? However, I was listening to a CD and the guy said, well, not at work. If your boss tells you something to do, you might as well, you have to do it, right? Because that's the person that's paying you. So don't be thinking that he has to have a group conscious with you. Now, if you're a boss and you appreciate leadership skills, when you're a boss, you can change that, right? You can become a leader, not a boss. But a lot of our bosses are just bosses. If they tell you something to do, you know, you just do it, because I don't want anybody blaming that they lost their job because they heard me speaking today. So, you know, there's balance, and tradition taught me a lot about balance and a lot about boundaries. When do I apply this and when I don't, right? So tradition 3 is the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using. Amazing tradition. This is the open doors of Narcotics Anonymous. This is what makes us different from a lot of other places, you know. And back in the day, actually this tradition said the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop using. Again, I was not around here in the 1960s, okay? But what happened is this created a lot of judgment, because who here can say or judge someone's honest desire to stay clean? And that created a lot of judgment. And this is the opposite of the traditions. The traditions are here to eliminate judgment and brings us, you know, on the same place as equals. So in 1960s, they changed the literature and they took the word honest out, and now it just says a desire. Now, we're human beings, we judge, so it's easy to judge people coming in over and over and over about relapse. I mean, after relapse, or people that are here for other reasons, they're signing their court card or they're loaded in meetings. I mean, you know, it's easy and it's our human first thought is to judge people. But this tradition tells us that if they are here, they're sitting in this meeting, there is some desire. And I am no one to judge that. We allow people to have their process. And for some people, they need to come and go for about 10 years to really surrender. I don't get to judge that. And, you know, and if I judge that, that is, you know, shame on me, because I can be the newcomer next week. You know, I don't know. The person that I'm judging is a newcomer. It could be the person that's going to save my life in 5 years when I take the wrong turn. You know, so this tradition really takes that judgment away, and it helps us to really welcome people back over and over and over. Okay? And we have a lot of people here that are in the maintenance program. And a lot of things that's really hard to talk about, but old timers used to talk about. So this is not Roberta talking. This is not Roberta judging. You know, we welcome people here forever. Narcotics Anonymous has second chances, third chances, fourth chances, 100 chances. But we do teach people that if you're going to be in service, that you have to have full abstinence. Okay, this is not Roberta talking or judging. This is history of Narcotics Anonymous, because you need to be able to help yourself first and learn those steps and achieve complete freedom from any mind-altering substances. Right? So you need to help yourself first. Put the mask first so you can help somebody else. Narcotics Anonymous, our message is you can be free from any substance. We don't want you to hold on in just one substance, because you're still not free. You still have to go buy something or be in the line to get something. If you go out of town, you have to have something, right? So our message is you can be free of anything. So we want you to be free of anything and have that experience to really carry the message. And we want you to work on yourself and learn the traditions to be able to be of service. So we welcome people, but we do teach them. If you're going to be of service, you have to achieve that for yourself first. Because that's what's passed on, right? I'm not going to put my opinion on anything, right? Because it's not about my opinion. I'm staying strict to the traditions, which is kind of like our policy and procedures, right? So, however, the third tradition is really what I learned on conditional love. I don't know about you guys, but like I said, I'm human first. But I learned to be welcoming to that newcomer or that doesn't look like me, that maybe doesn't smell good, that's coming off the streets. And I'm going to hug them no matter what because I hug you, and really paying attention to the newcomer because we get really distracted, including myself. We get our little groups, and we are talking or we're doing service and we forget the newcomer sometimes, and they need that compassion and that love. That's what I was looking when I was using drugs. I wanted that conditional love in my family. I wanted to have unconditional love from myself. And when I walk into these rooms and people didn't care that I was foreign, that Portuguese is my first language, and I'm short, that I'm blonde, that I was living a dirty lifestyle. People didn't care about that. They loved me no matter what. We stayed together because we want to get clean and because we want to live in recovery. That is our common ground. That's what we need to stick with, right? So I learned that in here in servicing and welcome people back. There's something here that's really important that I have to read. And it's not just about welcoming the newcomer in the meetings, right? It is about welcoming the newcomer everywhere. When we go to coffee, when we go to the meeting after the meeting, right? How are we going to teach people social skills? Because people taught me social skills. My sponsor took me to conventions and introduced me to everybody. Because I was freaking out, you guys. I needed it to be in her back pocket. She didn't tell me what to do. She showed me how to do it. She invited me to coffee. She invited me to the women's gatherings, I was able to start going to breakfasts with women. Or I went to campouts. Like this is the third tradition in action. Like we welcome people and we teach people how that it is safe to be with each other and talk and have meals and break bread. That happens too, right? Please not with a newcomer. Anyways. Right? But it happens. Some people take that to a whole other extreme. And that's okay too. When we come here, we think that sex is intimacy because we don't know how to talk. We don't understand that somebody can just be giving you love and empathy and they don't want anything to do with you sexually or they're not expecting anything out of you. Okay, and that's foreign for somebody coming off the streets like I was, So it says here on the tradition 3 that we become and maintain a community by getting together in lots of different ways besides meetings. Little gestures can help us feel connected. Many of us remember the first time we were invited to coffee after a meeting, feeling noticed and included. It is important to us. We're responsible to include new people in these activities. So if you're new, welcome. We put on these things for you. I'm up here talking about the traditions for you, right? And speaking is not my favorite thing to do, but I show up because everybody has a turn here, right? And I have to do that. It's my responsibility because somebody spoke for me. I went to conventions and I got inspired and I learned about the steps and traditions. That person made a sacrifice for me, right? They prepared. They had to deal with their anxiety. They did that for me so I could learn. So I have to do it too, So third tradition is amazing, right? And how do we apply this in our relationships, right? We allow people to have their own process in their relationships, right? If you're a couple in NA, good luck. It is really hard to practice that, right? We have to allow that person to work their process. And when we're in a relationship with non-addicts, we have to allow them not to understand what we do. They don't need to understand what we do. This is a program for us, right? They get to support us. And we have to coexist with them. And if it's not recovery or common ground, we better find some other things that are our common ground, right? We have to maintain that balance. So in relationships, if you have kids, it's the same thing. We have to allow our kids, our family members, to their own process. And if they make mistakes, we have to allow them to make mistakes. We do not cut people off in Narcotics Anonymous, and I was cut off by people in Narcotics Anonymous before, and it's very hurtful, including sponsorship before. And I had to feel that pain to really learn not to do that. Okay, we might not like each other in Narcotics Anonymous sometimes, and we don't have to, but we have to love each other. I have to protect my recovery, and I have to protect your recovery, so you have a place to come when you're hurting, right? And I'm also married to another addict, and I definitely, there are certain things when I'm going through that I don't speak in a group level, because I care for his recovery. I don't want people getting into my team and now start hating my spouse, and then he doesn't feel safe to come here and share. We have to do that with other people too, right? We have this is a safe place for everybody, not just for Roberta or for whatever, So working this tradition is really not allowing other people's opinions to separate you from others, is not allowing teaming up, and this is not high school. Sometimes it is a lot. It turns a lot like high school, but it's so hurtful when you're on the other side of that. And I have been on the other side of that. So you don't have to like everybody, but you have to love somebody. And the same, if you apply this in your relationships will grow, and you will become more intimate. And eventually, everybody gets into what they need to get into their process, And again, that person might save your life, you never know. So moving on tradition 4. I thought that I turned my timer. That's a problem. Okay. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or NA as a whole. Hang on 1 second, you all. I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to go until 6, and then we'll move on. Speaking on the tradition is not an easy thing. It's a lot easier to speak on your story, and because you don't have to prepare, and I had to really pray, because as an addict, I don't like to do hard things. I want to come here and hang out, and I want to hear you speak about the traditions, So I had to pray a lot since last night and this morning, like, God help me, my higher power, to walk through some difficult things, and just have a good attitude towards me putting the work today, because attraction, not promotion, right? But it doesn't mean I'm not human. I feel those feelings too, So I know you might be watching the clock. I'm watching the clock too. Right? Because I want to get going. I want to have some fun, eat some lunch, and enjoy this picnic. So, tradition 4. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or NA as a whole. Okay? So, tradition 4 is about balancing freedom with responsibility. Okay? So, this tradition pretty much says to the groups, you guys do whatever you want to carry this message. We don't want every group to look the same and do the same, However, you have to do that with a certain level of responsibility, because each group is part of an area. Each area is part of a region. Each region is part of the world of Narcotics Anonymous. So we need to have some kind of things in common. What is our common ground, right? We need to still stick and committed to our common ground, which is our message. And there are certain things that we need to do to protect our message, and that will be on tradition 7 and 8. But that's what this is saying, okay? And again, in a relationship, okay? If I'm in a relationship and my partner comes to me and say, this is really bothering me. This is really affecting me. I don't get to say, you know what? That's your problem. I don't think that's a big deal. And I walk off. That is an imbalanced relationship. The same with my coworker. I might not agree, but I still have to listen to. And once I listen to it, I have to find a common ground. Okay, if you still want to do this, and if this bothers you, what can we do together? Let's come up with something that both of us are happy with this. So again, we don't break up. The same with NA. If a group wants to do something, but it does affect other groups, and it does affect other areas, and it does affect our fellowship, we're putting our fellowship at risk to break up. It might not break up now, but it will break up in the future. Why? Because we're not sharing a common ground. Okay? So that's really what the tradition 4 is. Okay? So principles of the tradition 4 is autonomy, right? You get to practice some autonomy. Some groups come up with some really fun things. You can come up whatever you want on your format. But there are certain things you don't mess with it, which is the money in Narcotics Anonymous, right? Which is promotion, which is the anonymity. We don't get famous people to sponsor us. That anonymity is always have to happen. And our literature. Those are the main things that we want our groups to stay together. Because whenever you go in a meeting in a different part of the world, you're going to feel at home because you know what they're talking about, right? You walk into a meeting and you know what to expect and you're going to feel home. Traditions are called traditions for a reason, right? We have traditions in families. It's important to carry on history and remember our history. And traditions is about remembering our history. When we didn't follow those traditions, we fell apart in the 1950s. So we practice traditions just like we practice traditions in religion in our families to remind us of our history and to remind us where we're going and how important that is. Okay, so autonomy, commitment, integrity, responsibility, anonymity, consistency, humility, unity, and consideration, right? And I'm going to read something on page 80 here. And again, this is not Roberta. This is just here, right? 71. As an example, the desire to support fellow members with a common need may inspire us to create a specialized meeting format. We must remember that the sixth tradition cautions against endorsements and affiliation, and the 10th tradition warns us about the dangers of expressing opinion in outside issues. Okay? We could not create a meeting format directed at addicts with a particular religious or philosophical views, or a group meant for NA members who are also part of another organization outside of NA, or a group that reads material other than NA literature. Doing so would step beyond the autonomy afforded by the Tradition 4 by endorsing or affiliating with those outside groups' interests or beliefs. So when we endorse, mental health, or we endorse things that are going on in our culture, or different things, we do end up alienating, right? Is that the correct? Alienating other people that might not go with whatever is going culturally right now. And they needs to stand firm forever for other addicts to find the way out like we found the NA out. It doesn't mean I cannot be part of affiliations and like different things and be part of a biker group or I don't know, whatever, I'm trying to think of what affiliations do I have. Not many, as you can see. Well, I attend a church, I cannot combine my church with in a meeting, traditions are about boundaries and limits, This keeps NA for everybody, not just for me, okay? So that's for that. And how to apply this on our relationships is, again, about boundaries. Like, I get to do other things outside of my relationship. I have to have other parts of myself and different identities, okay? But when it comes to the relationship, I have to be careful what I'm bringing into that relationship if I think that's going to affect us or is going to break us up, right? So the same with work. I can bring other things into my work or to church, but if it starts affecting the church or my work, I have to remember where I'm at. This is the church. This is my employer. No, I have to leave that behind. I cannot make my work to live by the NA principles. I cannot make church, for example, make them to endorse our spiritual principles. It's about boundaries and limitations. Every place has its own set of rules, and I must respect that, right? So that's for Tradition 4. Tradition 5 is, hello y'all. Each group has but one primary purpose: to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. So, very simple. Tradition 5 is about carry the message. Don't carry the messenger. Okay, so when we're sharing, or we're sharing the miracle of Narcotics Anonymous, or we go to an HNI, we don't make that all about us. We make about the message. I said that so many times, I'm not going to be able to say it for a whole year. So it's about setting our ego aside and just carrying the message. Our message is The simpler our message, the better. Our message is just that powerful, okay? So, spiritual principles, integrity, commitment, anonymity, vigilance, unity, service, fidelity. I had to look that up. Fidelity is about sticking with one thing and respecting that, okay? Purpose and consistency. And when we share, we don't have to sound, I had a problem with sharing. I thought that I had to sound so knowledgeable and I was very self-conscious about that. When we share, we just have to share from our heart and our experience and share some hope. And the hope is our experience. So a newcomer can share, if I have 1 day clean, you can share your experience and strength and hope to that person that has 0 day clean. Okay? So again, we all have our own little message. And as long as we speak that from our heart, and we speak the message of Narcotics Anonymous, we're good to go. And what is our message? That any addict can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. That's it. We're not promising anything else. We're just promising freedom and hope. Right? So again, we have to step ourselves aside because we want to add that on, right? Oh, you can get all this stuff in Narcotics Anonymous. Some of us don't, and we have to be okay with that. So, Tradition 6, and any group will never endorse, finance, or lend the NA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, or prestige divert us from our primary purpose. I believe Tradition 6 has, again, a lot to do with boundaries and limits. We have to be self-sufficient, so we are declining outside contributions and endorsements because being part of society, we have to be self-sufficient.
Move along.
Yes. What is that, 30? That's my 30, yes. So we got 30 more, you guys. We're going to get through this. Thank you. If you need to take a break, go ahead. I might need to take a break, but I can't take a break. So there's nothing as free lunch, okay? So in Narcotics Anonymous, when somebody asks us to give us something that's outside of our program, we have to be very careful because they might demand things back, and we want NA to just be clear of anything like that. And it's also about trusting ourselves that we can create something here that's going to keep moving forward in our lives too. If we have to start taking outside, if we're not self-sufficient and we're getting outside favors, not only we might have to return those favors, we might want to revisit ourselves and really think, are we living within our means? Because that's what this tradition teaches us, is to live within our means. Sometimes if we don't have money to put an event or we don't have whatever we need, we might have to wait, imagine that, us having to wait and have patience. But if we do that, we put it together. Nobody else gave it to us, and nobody else can take it away from us, and nobody else can demand that they're just going to insert themselves into our fellowship, right? We're going to protect our fellowship. Spiritual principles of that is integrity, humility, vigilance, confidence, faith, prudence, autonomy, faith, fidelity, perseverance, anonymity, confidence, boundaries, and surrender. Again, all from this book. This is not Roberta coming up with anything, okay? I am not that smart. So being really careful with politics, not bringing that in. Church, being very careful with treatment centers and special causes, just keeping those boundaries very, very firm, right? And how do we apply that in our lives is, again, it's about boundaries, right? Not allowing outside influences in our relationship. This doesn't mean we cannot ask for help. We can ask for help. We just don't want to depend on other people's help or resources. And the same in a relationship. We can go out and maybe ask for, go see a therapist or a lawyer or a doctor. We can. We just don't want to depend on outside influences to keep us moving forward, if that makes any sense. and finding whatever we need within that relationship, okay? So that moves us to tradition 7. And I know we read the tradition 7 in a lot of our meetings is, it's the tradition about money. Every NA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. And then we pass the basket, right? However, this tradition, again, is a lot about freedom. It's about responsibility. We are responsible for our own fellowship. And we are self-sufficient. We got to collect our own monies to make this thing work. So when we are part of this fellowship in our groups, like we don't only support our area and our region and the world by being of service. We also have to support them financially because they are there to serve the groups, right? They serve us. How can they serve us if we're not providing the money for them? So we should not keep a lot of money in our home groups. We should have a little reserve and keep passing that money for the people that have the service positions to help us grow. Okay, print literature, print meeting schedules, and carrying that message. That's where that money is going. Carrying the message through literature translation, all the other parts of Narcotics Anonymous. And it teaches a lot about resources and limitations. Like traditions are a lot about like with your boundaries, mind your own business, and do things within your limits, okay? And we learn that by applying in service and then taking those principles within our lives, right? Spiritual principles is sacrifice. We have to sacrifice. Responsibility, freedom, unity, faith, surrender, anonymity, autonomy, integrity, humility, simplicity, and commitment, okay? When it comes to relationships in our personal lives, this means that, live within your limits, but you can also ask for help. Some people think, now, I'm going to just say no to everything that I need help. We can ask for help. We just don't want to depend on it, okay? And we don't want to depend on things that we can do ourselves. And that's really what the next 3 traditions are all about, is how we function as groups. I'll take questions later, if that's okay.
I wanted to say something. Tradition 7 is about being fully self-supporting. Is about a whole lot more than just money.
Correct.
It's about time. It's about not being self-centered, getting service,
Right.
It's giving back. So
Very
while
true.
you're on 7, I wanted to say that's a lot more
Very
than
true.
just money.
Very true. And actually the 8 and the 9 tradition talks about that. Okay, so how do we do that, right? We're saying, no, we're going to do things, but how do we do that if we're just going to do things our own, okay? So tradition 8 talks about Narcotics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, kind of what you're saying. We must serve the fellowship, right? Remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. So tradition 8 is, I'm going to just say the spiritual principles, is about humility, surrender, service, anonymity, autonomy, accountability, and integrity. Okay, there are no professionals in NA. So if you have letters behind your name or lawyer, doctors, or whoever or whatever, when we come in through that door, we're just addicts. That's why I always introduce myself. I'm an addict. My name is Roberta. And I learned that in the literature. I'm not even Roberta and I'm an addict. I'm first an addict and then I'm Roberta. Because I have to find that common ground with you guys. Because if I don't, I think I know better and I'm just going to be out the door, right? So, again, it reminds us that we're all equal. And we have the responsibility to serve, right? So, because if we don't serve, then we have to get outside help. And we shouldn't try to get outside help. We need to try to serve our fellowship ourselves, because that creates unity. That's how you learn all the sets of traditions. That's how you learn about social skills. You learn how to get along. And you learn how to become a productive member of society. So we should be able to serve the fellowship ourselves, and there's a place for everybody, and nobody's more important than anybody. The person that makes coffee is as important as the person that's running area and region. All of us are the same when it comes to serving the fellowship, okay? And all of us should be able to serve the fellowship, no matter what your background is, and even if you don't have experience. It's not about that. You will learn along the way, okay? So service is definitely vital, and it doesn't mean that we cannot hire professionals. We can hire professionals when we need extra help or when we absolutely cannot do something. Then we should hire professional help. again, this gives us the freedom in our relationships to maybe hire a therapist, a lawyer, a doctor, right? Or other people that can help us, or food service or a cleaning service when we don't have times in our relationship that we can't do something for ourselves. Tradition 9. NA as such will never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. So, again, we want that responsibility to be within us members, right? The groups, the areas, the regions, the world service. That's what we're made for. We're made of. We're made of sharing service and helping each other. That's how we learn, and that's how we become part of the fellowship. Okay? And we make suggestions here, but we don't organize how you work the steps. We say, you should go to 90 meetings in 90 days, but we don't tell you what meetings you should go. We say you should work the steps, but we don't tell you what type of steps you should work and how you should work it. We follow the suggestions, but we don't organize how those suggestions are going to be happening, right? Because everybody's responsible for their own program. But we do organize things in NA when it comes to finances, and when it comes to area service, or when it comes to, hospitals and institutions. There's parts of NA that are organized, but there's parts of NA that are not organized, and we all have our own autonomy to work our program and find what works for us. Let me see. So that was 9. And the same in relationships, we all chip in the relationship to make the relationship work. If one person in the relationship is making everything happening, this relationship is not equal, and it's not going to work, and it's not going to be successful. And the same with what we do here in Narcotics Anonymous. So tradition 10, Narcotics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the NA name will never be drawn into public controversy. So this tradition is about neutrality, okay? It's a lot about boundaries, wisdom, simplicity, commitment, fidelity, humility, anonymity, integrity, acceptance, and unity. We simply try to stick with our message only, and our message is very simple. When we start getting into other things and affiliations, we start, it just gets a little dangerous, and other people might not be into that, and that might turn them away, okay? And we want this to be a place for everybody. Our message, as simple as it is enough. And I know we want to bring other things in, but just remember how powerful this message is, and just carrying the message is enough. So this helps this addict that likes to complicate and over-prepare everything, as you can see, right? But that's really our message, and it's just that powerful. And I believe it because I heard it on my first meeting, and I'm still here. So just stay focused on our message, And again, how does this apply to relationships? Is, a lot of it is try to have the wisdom to not have opinions about other addicts, how they work their program. If you're in a relationship, how the other person takes the trash out. That's very hard. Just stay within your own path. Mind your own business kind of thing, right? But this helps in relationships. So tradition 11. Our public relationships policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. So tradition, I think all tradition, 10 and 11, they talk a lot about sacrificing, okay? You're going to have to sacrifice your opinion, and you're going to have to sacrifice things that you want to add on and promises you want to add on to our message. When we're here, we're just about the message, okay? So the spiritual principles of the 10 tradition is, again, wisdom, faith, fidelity, anonymity, humility, service. Wisdom, I already said that. Discernment, goodwill, integrity, and gratitude. Recovery will speak for itself. We don't have authority here. We have to let go of pride and ego to speak for the program. And when we do have to speak for the program, usually there is a committee responsible for that, and they know exactly what to say. They have policies and rules that they follow to be able to say that. So how do we apply that in our relationships is, I wrote this, it's not what we say, but it is who we are. We are the program in Narcotics Anonymous. Sometimes it's not what we say, it's how we walk and how we act in this program. And that is enough. Thank God. Because when I'm here, I don't have letters behind my name. I don't have to have great knowledge. I don't have to have 45 years clean. I just have to be an addict, living this process on a daily basis, applying the spiritual principles, being of service, applying the traditions, and that is the message itself. So it does give me a lot of freedom and self-esteem to just be who I am and being okay with who I am and knowing that I am enough as a recovering addict, and I am enough to help another recovering addict, and I am enough to talk to a newcomer when they come in a group level or go to an H&I meeting. I mean, that's a lot of freedom, because I don't know if you guys are like me. I get into my head and I think I don't know things, or somebody else knows more than I do and they should talk. And it, it's, the message is so simple. It's just about my personal message and what Narcotics Anonymous has done for me, and that's enough. So we finally get into 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Like I said, when I didn't know anything about the traditions, before I worked the traditions with my sponsor, my definition of anonymity was just very basic, but going through each tradition and learning how to apply that, I really learned that anonymity is just about us being all equal. We have a common ground here, and staying by that common ground, and not allowing my head to think that people know more than me, or they have more clean time, or they participate in more things, so they know better and I should be quiet, and just knowing that we're all the same here. However we serve, we're all the same. Whatever we are at in our paths, we're all the same. So we can carry this message and help people to find the message. That can be in a group level, that can be in an area, region, or NA, the world NA when you're service there. So, again, I learned this through the literature, that none of our traditions stand alone. We cannot practice some and others. They all make our program what it is. And the traditions, when we are applying these traditions, we learn to protect not just our recovery, we're protecting the newcomer's recovery, and we're protecting the fellowship as a whole. And it's, our responsibility to hold that door for the person that's just coming in. If we're not in balance, if we're not in harmony, that really can hurt our message and can hurt the newcomer. And this is a life or death kind of disease. And it's also about us, looking into the future and protecting our fellowship. And all I can say is the traditions helped me from being that little scared girl when I was here, and I felt so less than everybody. I felt foreign. I didn't talk to anybody, and it helped. And when I did talk and I did learn about the steps, then I went to the other side. That's what we do. We go from this side to the other side to the other extreme. Now I know everything, and I know everybody, and I have my little group and my little clique, and I forgot about the other people that maybe are not there yet, or maybe their voice is a little more quiet, right? Or maybe they're afraid to talk, or maybe they're afraid to, embrace our way of life. And by learning these things, I can be in both places. I can have my life and my personality and my affiliations outside of Narcotics Anonymous, but when I'm here, I'm sacrificing all of that. So the new person, or the person that's alone, or the person that's afraid, know that this can be their place too, and that they're loved, and they're cared, and that they matter, and that they have a value, and most important is that they can find what I found in Narcotics Anonymous. So to close us, I'm going to read something from All Will Be Well, because sometimes you learn all these things and you're like, oh my God, so many things can go wrong, so scary, but when you read this last part of guiding principles, all will be well, it kind of puts it all together, okay? And that's really what the 12th tradition is how to apply anonymity on each of the traditions. And I'm not going to go there because we'll be here another hour, and I know we have a fun day. So I'll close with this. This is on page 239, guiding principles. Like a lighthouse on the rocky shore, guiding us away from danger, the 12 traditions of Narcotics Anonymous help us navigate in accordance with our principles, our purpose, and our paths. This is not the final word on our traditions, but the beginning of a journey with the principles as our guide. So long as we follow this way, all will be well. And that's all I have. Thank you for letting me share.